She never thought she'd be the one under suspicion. Jasmine Carter, a 35-year-old quality management consultant for a top-tier firm, had been through 1,000 airports before, each more routine than the last. But today was different. Today, she was going to face something she'd never imagined. It was a day like any other at Gate 22 of Kingsley International Airport. Passengers shuffled in and out, the sound of rolling suitcases mixing with the soft hum of the overhead speakers. The terminal was packed with travelers, but none of them knew the storm that was brewing in the air. Jasmine had just finished a week-long business trip in New York, and she was looking forward to returning to her quiet apartment and her family. She hadn't even noticed Officer Mark Thompson until he approached her at security. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, his tone sharp. "Could you step aside for a moment?" Jasmine, who had already been through security, froze. The officer's gaze was cold, and she could tell there was no kindness in it. She glanced around, noticing a few people staring. Her heart began to race, but she remained calm. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. The officer didn't answer right away. He simply gestured for her to follow him to the side, out of the flow of people. "We need to check your bag," he said, almost as if daring her to challenge him. Jasmine felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She'd done nothing wrong, but she could feel the weight of his gaze on her, as if he had already made up his mind about her. As she walked, she noticed the other passengers still looking, some with curiosity, others with judgment in their eyes. Jasmine could feel the sting of being singled out. She thought back to all the times she'd heard the whispers, seen the side-eye glances, felt the assumptions made about her because of the color of her skin. The officer unzipped her bag, rifling through the contents without saying a word. "I don't know what you think you're doing," she said, her voice calm but firm. "But I'm not here to cause any trouble." He glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "We're just doing our job, ma'am. You fit the description." Jasmine's mind raced. "The description?" she asked, though she already knew what he meant. She had been here before, too many times to count. Officer Thompson continued to search her bag, the tension in the air thickening by the second. Jasmine stood still, her heart pounding in her chest. She had been judged and dismissed far too many times to count, and yet, she always managed to hold her ground. What the officer didn't know, what no one here knew, was that she wasn't just any woman. She wasn't just some random traveler at an airport. Jasmine Carter was the head of quality management at one of the most powerful corporations in the country. And she was tired. Tired of being judged, tired of being silenced, and tired of being underestimated. When the officer found nothing of interest, his frustration was evident. "I'm sorry for the inconvenience," he muttered, but there was no remorse in his voice. Jasmine took a deep breath, feeling the sting of the moment. Just as she was about to gather her things and leave, she looked at the officer and said, "I'm Jasmine Carter. I'm a senior executive at XYZ Corporation. You have no idea who you just messed with." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. The officer froze, his face turning pale as the realization hit him. Jasmine was no ordinary woman. She was more than just a statistic or a stereotype. In an instant, his stance softened, and he quickly apologized, his arrogance now replaced by embarrassment. But for Jasmine, the damage had already been done. She turned and walked away, her dignity intact, but the weight of the moment still hanging over her. As she left the airport, she couldn't help but think about how many other people, like her, had been judged wrongly, treated unfairly, and how many never had the chance to stand up for themselves like she had. As Jasmine walked towards the exit, the weight of what had just happened hung heavily in the air. She had taken a deep breath when Officer Thompson apologized, his voice low and embarrassed. But Jasmine wasn't fooled. She knew this moment wasn't just about her. It was about something much bigger, something that too many people experienced every day, but never had the chance to fight back against. She made her way through the crowd, her steps slow but purposeful. The hum of the airport continued around her, but she was in her own world now, lost in thought. What if she hadn't been in control of her emotions? What if she had reacted differently? Her experience with prejudice wasn't new. She'd faced it countless times before, but never quite like this. There was something about the arrogance of the officer, the quick assumptions, that pushed her further than ever before. For a moment, she wanted to turn around and give him a piece of her mind, but she held back. Instead, She focused on the calm she had worked so hard to cultivate over the years. She thought about her family, about how far she'd come, and how she had earned every step of her success. Jasmine had learned long ago that the real battle was often internal. She could control how she responded to the world around her. She could choose to be the bigger person. And today, she had chosen to rise above. The journey to her gate was quiet, save for the faint footsteps of travelers behind her. She couldn't help but notice how many people, particularly people of color, were moving through the airport with a quiet unease in their eyes, as if they too were aware that a single moment could turn into something much worse. As she reached the security checkpoint, she pulled out her boarding pass and ID, ready for her final steps. But before she could hand them over, a man in a dark suit approached her, his expression serious. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, his voice polite but firm. Jasmine raised an eyebrow, wondering if something else was about to happen. Had Officer Thompson said something else? "I'm with the airport security team," the man continued, showing his badge. "We need to have a quick word with you." Jasmine stood still, her mind racing. She didn't want to be involved in anything else, but she knew how to handle situations like this. "What's this about?" she asked, her voice even but with a hint of curiosity. The man gave her a sympathetic look. "I know this must be frustrating, but we have a procedure to follow. I just need to clear something up with you." The tension in the air felt palpable, but Jasmine didn't allow herself to show any signs of frustration. She had worked hard to get to where she was, and nothing, not even this, would take away her peace of mind. The man motioned for her to step aside, and she followed him towards a small office just off the terminal. The door clicked shut behind them, and the space felt cold and sterile, with only a small window to the outside world. Jasmine stood in front of a desk while the man sat down and began typing something on a computer. The silence between them stretched for a moment before he finally spoke again. "Ma'am, we've reviewed the footage of your interaction with Officer Thompson," he began, his tone softer now. "It seems there was some misunderstanding on his part. We're very sorry about the way things were handled." Jasmine's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't surprised, but hearing it confirmed still felt like a small victory. She nodded, her posture still composed. "I appreciate the apology," she said, her voice steady. "But what matters is that we don't let things like this happen again." The man looked at her, and for a brief moment, he seemed to see her. "You're right," he said quietly. "We'll make sure this doesn't happen again." As Jasmine left the small office, she couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. She had stood her ground, not just for herself, but for everyone who had been treated unfairly because of the color of their skin. The world wasn't perfect, but moments like these made her believe that change, no matter how small, was still possible. When she finally reached her gate and sat down, she took a deep breath, letting the tension of the last hour melt away. The plane was ready to board, and as she looked around at the other passengers, she thought about what it meant to truly be seen, to be heard, to be respected. She didn't need to make a grand statement. Today, Jasmine Carter had done something much more powerful. She had simply shown up, and in doing so, she had reminded herself and everyone around her that no one could ever take away her dignity. Jasmine arrived at her apartment later that afternoon, the sound of her suitcase wheels echoing against the quiet hallway. She paused at the door for a moment, her hand on the doorknob. It had been a long day, full of emotions and unexpected twists. As she stepped inside, she felt the familiar warmth of home wrap around her. It was a small apartment, nothing fancy, but it was hers. The walls were lined with bookshelves filled with her favorite novels, and the kitchen table had a stack of papers and a cup of coffee she hadn't finished earlier. She kicked off her shoes and walked toward the kitchen, reaching for the mug on the counter. The warmth of the coffee seeped into her hands, grounding her in the moment. She needed this. She needed to breathe. As she sat down at the table, her thoughts drifted back to the airport. The apology from Officer Thompson, while appreciated, hadn't erased the sting of the encounter. She had always known the world could be unfair, but today had made her realize just how much power a simple assumption could hold. She hadn't done anything wrong. Yet, there she was, treated like a suspect simply because of the color of her skin. Jasmine knew it wasn't just about her. She had heard the stories, seen the news, talked to friends and family who had faced similar situations, some of them without the chance to stand up for themselves like she had. She wondered how many people went through their lives being judged for things they couldn't change, things they didn't deserve. The injustice wasn't new to her, but the way it had happened so quickly, the way it had unfolded right in front of her eyes, left a bitter taste in her mouth. She had felt powerless in those first few moments. But she had made a choice. She had chosen not to let her emotions control her, to stand tall and stay calm. And in doing so, she had found her voice. Her mind wandered to the people who didn't have that chance. The ones who couldn't stay calm. The ones who were never given the benefit of the doubt. She thought about how different the world could be if everyone had the same opportunity to be heard, to be respected. She wished she could do more. She wanted to make a difference, to fight for those who were treated the same way she had been. But for now, she was going to take a moment for herself. Jasmine leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes and letting the quiet of her apartment wash over her. The weight of the day was heavy, but she knew that tomorrow would be a new day, a new opportunity to keep fighting, to keep pushing for change. She finished her coffee, took a deep breath, and stood up. As she walked to her bedroom, she thought about the journey ahead. It wouldn't be easy, but she was ready. She had a purpose, and no one, not even a moment of injustice, could take that away from her. The next morning, Jasmine woke up to the soft hum of her alarm clock. She rubbed her eyes and stretched, the quiet morning giving her the space she needed to reflect. Yesterday had been a whirlwind of emotions and unexpected events. But today was different. She was ready. She had a meeting with the company's board of directors, a crucial presentation that would determine the direction of an important project she had been working on for months. As she stood in front of her bathroom mirror, she adjusted her blouse and ran a hand through her hair, gathering her thoughts. Her reflection stared back at her, confident and poised. She was no longer the woman who had been shaken by an encounter with prejudice. She was a woman who had reclaimed her power. Jasmine walked into the kitchen, where the sunlight streamed through the window, filling the room with warmth. She brewed her coffee, the aroma filling the air as she prepared herself mentally for the day ahead. She thought about the path that had brought her here, the long hours of hard work, the obstacles she had overcome, and the countless times she had proven herself. She had earned every step of her success, and today would be no different. As she sipped her coffee, her phone buzzed with a message. It was from her colleague, Robert. "Looking forward to your presentation today. You've got this." She smiled and quickly typed back, "Thanks, Robert. Let's make this happen." The drive to the office was calm, the streets quiet as the city slowly came to life. Jasmine's mind focused on the presentation. She had prepared meticulously, knowing that her team's future depended on her. The board meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m., and she arrived early, as always. As she walked through the lobby, she couldn't help but notice how different things felt now. She was no longer just another face in the crowd. She was Jasmine Carter, a respected leader in her field. The receptionist smiled at her as she walked past, and Jasmine returned the gesture with a nod. "Good morning, Ms. Carter," the receptionist said, her voice warm. "Good morning," Jasmine replied, feeling a sense of calm wash over her. The meeting room was large, with a long conference table at its center. The board members were already seated, reviewing documents and discussing the agenda. When Jasmine entered, the room fell silent, all eyes on her. She took a deep breath, feeling the familiar rush of adrenaline, but she didn't flinch. She had been in this situation before, but today, it was different. She walked confidently to the front of the room and set down her briefcase. "Good morning, everyone," she said, her voice steady and clear. "I'm excited to share the progress we've made on the project. I believe it's going to be a game changer for the company." As she began her presentation, Jasmine felt a sense of power that she hadn't realized she had. The words flowed smoothly, each slide reinforcing her team's hard work and dedication. She could see the board members nodding in approval, their skepticism from previous meetings slowly melting away. As the presentation came to a close, Jasmine glanced around the room, meeting the eyes of each board member. She felt a moment of triumph. They were listening. They were seeing her for who she truly was. The meeting ended with applause, and the board members expressed their gratitude for her leadership and vision. "Jasmine, that was impressive," the CEO said, shaking her hand. "We're excited to move forward with your plan." Jasmine smiled, a feeling of pride swelling in her chest. She had done it, not just for the company, but for herself. As she walked out of the meeting room, her phone buzzed again. It was another message from Robert. "You nailed it. I knew you would. Jasmine's heart swelled. She had proven to herself, and to everyone around her, that she was capable of anything. The road ahead wasn't always going to be easy, but she was ready for whatever came her way. She had faced prejudice, judgment, and doubt, but none of it could stop her now. She had learned to trust herself, to believe in her abilities, and to never back down from a challenge. As she left the office building that afternoon, the sun setting behind her, she felt a sense of peace. She had come a long way, and the journey had only just begun. The next few days passed by in a blur for Jasmine. Her success at the board meeting had given her a boost of confidence, but it also opened up a new chapter in her life, one where she knew she had to balance her newfound power with the responsibilities that came with it. The project she had presented was now on track, and Jasmine found herself deeply involved in the implementation phase. The office was a whirlwind of activity, with constant meetings and planning sessions. But amidst all the work, there was a sense of pride that she couldn't shake. She had come so far, and for once, she felt like the path she was walking was exactly where she was meant to be. However, the weight of her position wasn't without its challenges. Jasmine had always known that being in a leadership role meant facing scrutiny, but she hadn't anticipated just how much she would have to fight for respect. There were whispers in the hallways, subtle looks of skepticism from a few colleagues who had never truly believed in her. Jasmine had learned to ignore the doubt, but it was hard not to notice it when it came from people who had once been her peers. She couldn't let it get to her. Her focus remained on the project, on the team that was relying on her, and most importantly, on the promise she had made to herself. She had to keep proving that she belonged in this space. That night, Jasmine sat at her kitchen table, reviewing the latest project updates on her laptop. The kitchen was quiet, the only sound being the soft hum of the refrigerator in the background. As she glanced over the numbers, she felt a sense of satisfaction. Things were moving forward, and that was all she could ask for. But then her phone buzzed, pulling her out of her thoughts. She glanced at the screen and saw that it was a message from her mother. "Just checking in, how are you doing?" Jasmine smiled and typed back, "Doing great, Mom. Busy as usual, but everything's going well." Her mom's reply came almost immediately. "I'm proud of you. You've worked so hard for this. Just remember to take care of yourself too." Jasmine's heart warmed as she read the message. Her mom had always been her biggest supporter, even when Jasmine felt like the world was against her. She had always reminded her that she was strong enough to handle anything. And now, more than ever, Jasmine realized how true that was. As she sat back in her chair, she let her thoughts wander. She thought about her journey, the years of hard work, the obstacles, and the moments where she had doubted herself. But each time, she had pushed through. She had learned to take the hits, to brush off the negativity, and to stay focused on her goals. Jasmine had always known that her race and gender would be a challenge in her career, but she had never let it define her. She had worked harder, fought smarter, and had built a reputation based on her skills and dedication. The road had never been easy, but it had been worth it. She glanced at the clock and realized how late it had gotten. It was time to wind down for the night. But before she did, she allowed herself a moment of reflection. She was proud of how far she had come, proud of the woman she had become. And she knew, no matter what challenges lay ahead, she was ready to face them head on. The next morning, Jasmine woke up feeling refreshed and energized. Today was a new day, and she had a purpose. As she got dressed and prepared for another busy day at the office, she reminded herself of one thing. She had earned this. No one could take away her accomplishments, and no one could tell her she didn't belong. Today, she would keep pushing forward, one step at a time, knowing that she was exactly where she was meant to be. As Jasmine walked into the office the next morning, she felt a new sense of determination. The previous days had shown her what she was capable of, but today, she felt like she was on the edge of something even greater. The project was moving smoothly, and her team was starting to get the recognition they deserved. Still, there was a nagging feeling in the back of her mind. She couldn't shake the thought of the subtle resistance she sometimes felt from certain colleagues. They didn't always say it outright, but there was an air of skepticism whenever she walked into a room. It was as though her success was still something they were waiting to see fall apart. Jasmine knew it was a challenge she would have to face as long as she remained in this position. But today, she was ready to confront it head-on. As she entered her office, she noticed the buzz of activity outside her door. Her assistant, Maria, was already there, her face lighting up when she saw Jasmine. "Good morning, Miss Carter. There's a meeting scheduled with the legal team at 11 a.m. They're waiting for your input on the new contract." Jasmine smiled, appreciating Maria's punctuality. "Thanks, Maria. I'll be there in a few." She closed the door behind her and sat at her desk. The silence of her office was a welcome contrast to the bustle of the outside world. She took a deep breath and went over the documents in front of her, mentally preparing for the discussion ahead. It wasn't just about the contract. It was about her presence in the room. Jasmine had learned that to be heard, she had to assert herself. It wasn't enough to just have the right answers. She had to be confident in delivering them. As she made her way to the conference room, she felt the familiar weight of expectation. The legal team was already seated at the table, their faces serious as they reviewed the latest draft of the contract. As Jasmine entered, the room fell silent. She took a seat at the head of the table, her posture straight, her presence commanding. "Good morning, everyone," she said, her voice steady. "Let's get started." As she reviewed the terms with the team, Jasmine found herself becoming more and more immersed in the discussion. Her mind was sharp, and she could see the gaps in the contract that others had overlooked. With each comment she made, she felt the skepticism in the room begin to dissipate. By the time the meeting concluded, the legal team was on board with her suggestions, and the contract was ready to move forward. "Thank you, Ms. Carter," one of the senior lawyers said as the meeting adjourned. "Your input was invaluable." Jasmine smiled, her confidence growing with each compliment. As she walked back to her office, she realized just how far she had come. The woman who had once felt unsure of herself in these very meetings now commanded the room. She was no longer just part of the conversation. She was leading it. As the day wore on, Jasmine found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. She had fought for every inch of respect she had earned, but she knew that there was still more to be done. She had reached a level of success that most people only dreamed of, but she couldn't afford to get complacent. There would always be challenges, always be people who doubted her. But now, more than ever, she was ready for whatever came next. As the evening approached and Jasmine prepared to leave the office, she glanced at her reflection in the window. She looked different, stronger, more confident. She had proven to herself that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. And tomorrow, she would prove it again. The following week brought more challenges and new triumphs for Jasmine. She woke up early on Monday morning, as usual, and began her day with the same routine. A cup of coffee, a quick review of her emails, and a moment of reflection. But today, something felt different. She had become used to the pressures and expectations, but this morning, she felt the weight of her achievements in a new way. As she walked into the office, her confidence was evident. She had successfully navigated the first few months in her new role, and now, it was time to start tackling the bigger picture. Jasmine had spent years proving herself, but she knew that now was the time to step into her power fully. It was no longer just about surviving the workplace. It was about leading it. Her thoughts were interrupted when she saw Maria in the hallway, her assistant holding a folder with an urgent look on her face. "Ms. Carter, the CEO wants to see you in his office immediately. He has some updates on the expansion plan." Jasmine's heart skipped a beat. She had been expecting a discussion on the upcoming plans, but she hadn't anticipated a meeting this soon. "Thank you, Maria. I'll be right there," she said, her voice steady. As she walked down the hallway, she couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. This meeting could change the trajectory of the project she had worked so hard on. When she reached the CEO's office, the door was already open, and Mr. Turner, the CEO, was sitting behind his desk, reviewing some documents. "Ah, Jasmine, come in," he said, looking up with a smile. "Please, take a seat." Jasmine nodded and sat down, her posture confident yet composed. She had been in this position before, facing important discussions that could affect her future, but this time, she wasn't nervous. She was ready. "I've been reviewing the initial phases of the expansion plan," Mr. Turner began. "And I have to say, I'm impressed with your leadership on this. We're looking to move forward more aggressively, and I think we need someone like you to lead the charge." Jasmine felt a rush of pride. She had worked tirelessly on the plan, and to hear her efforts acknowledged meant the world. "Thank you, Mr. Turner. I'm excited to continue moving forward and take this to the next level," she replied. The conversation shifted to the details of the plan, budgets, timelines, and the team's readiness. Jasmine provided insights and suggestions, demonstrating her deep understanding of the project. She felt the respect in the room growing as she spoke, and it wasn't just about her words. It was about the conviction behind them. By the end of the meeting, Mr. Turner stood up and extended his hand. "We're confident you're the right person for this job. You've got our full support," he said. Jasmine shook his hand, a smile forming on her lips. "Thank you. I won't let you down." As she left the CEO's office, Jasmine couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. She had come a long way from the woman who once doubted her place. At the table, she had earned this moment, and now she was ready to lead. The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings, emails, and follow-up tasks. But through it all, Jasmine kept her focus. She was no longer just a participant in the company's success. She was the driving force behind it. That evening, as she sat in her apartment, sipping her coffee, she reflected on how much had changed. The woman who had once been overlooked and underestimated was now the one who made the decisions. Jasmine had stepped into her power, and there was no turning back. She had always known that she had something special to offer, and now, the world was beginning to see it too. Jasmine sat at her desk, reviewing the final details of the expansion plan. The project had grown significantly since she first took charge, and it was now on the verge of becoming a major milestone for the company. The upcoming presentation to the board would be crucial, and she needed to ensure that every detail was perfect. As she clicked through the slides, she felt a sense of pride in how far she had come. The road had been challenging, but it had shaped her into the leader she was today. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from Robert. "I know you've got the presentation, but if you need any help, I'm here." Jasmine smiled, grateful for the support. "Thanks, Robert. I've got it covered, but I appreciate it." As she continued her preparations, Jasmine found herself reflecting on her journey. The past few years had been filled with hard work, setbacks, and victories, but every experience had taught her something valuable. The challenges she had faced had only made her stronger, and the people who had doubted her had only fueled her determination. She had learned to trust herself, to believe in her abilities, and to never back down from a challenge. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the door. Maria entered, holding a stack of papers. "Everything is set for the presentation, Miss Carter. The board members are eager to hear your updates." Jasmine nodded and stood up, smoothing her blouse. "Thank you, Maria. Let's make sure we leave a lasting impression." As they walked to the conference room, Jasmine could feel her heart race with excitement and nerves. This was her moment, the culmination of months of hard work and dedication. The boardroom was filled with the usual group of executives, all seated around the large table. They greeted her as she entered, their expressions neutral, but Jasmine knew they were all waiting to see what she would bring to the table. She took her place at the head of the table, her laptop open and ready. The presentation began smoothly, with Jasmine outlining the key points of the expansion plan. She could see the board members listening intently, their attention focused on the details she had so carefully crafted. As she moved through the slides, she highlighted the projected growth, the strategic partnerships, and the timeline for implementation. Jasmine's confidence grew with each passing moment. By the time she reached the final slide, she knew she had made her case. The room was silent as the board members absorbed the information. Finally, the CEO, Mr. Turner, spoke. "Jasmine, this is impressive. Your vision for the future of the company is exactly what we need." Jasmine felt a rush of pride. It had taken everything in her to get to this point, but she had earned the respect of the people who had once doubted her. "Thank you, Mr. Turner. I'm excited for what comes next." The meeting concluded with applause, and Jasmine felt the weight of the moment sink in. She had done it. She had proven that she was capable of leading, of making decisions that would shape the future of the company. As she left the boardroom, her phone buzzed again. It was a message from her mother. "I knew you could do it, honey. I'm so proud of you." Jasmine's heart swelled with gratitude. She had come so far, and her journey was far from over. As she walked back to her office, she reflected on the people who had supported her along the way, the mentors, the colleagues, and most importantly, her family. They had all played a role in helping her reach this point. And now, she knew she was ready for whatever came next. Her career was just beginning, and the possibilities were endless. The following weeks passed quickly as Jasmine continued to lead her team with confidence. The expansion project was progressing smoothly, and with each milestone, her reputation within the company grew stronger. Despite the success, there were moments when Jasmine felt the pressure weighing on her. She had been given a responsibility, one that many had doubted she could handle, but now, she was proving them wrong, and in doing so, she was changing the narrative for herself and others like her. It wasn't just about the work, it was about breaking barriers. Her phone buzzed again, this time a call from Robert. "Hey, Jasmine, I just wanted to check in. You're killing it with the expansion plan. How are you holding up?" Jasmine smiled, hearing the genuine concern in his voice. "Thanks, Robert. It's a lot, but I'm doing well. Everything's moving in the right direction. I have no doubt about that. You've earned every bit of this success," Robert said, his voice full of pride. "Just remember to take time for yourself, okay?" Jasmine nodded, even though he couldn't see her. "I will. I promise." As she hung up, she thought about what he had said. She had been so focused on the work, on the next big goal, that she hadn't taken a moment to pause and appreciate how far she had come. Her mind wandered back to the days when she first started at the company, uncertain and eager to prove herself. Back then, it felt like she was constantly fighting against an invisible wall. But now, the wall was gone, and she had built something stronger in its place, a foundation of respect and trust. That evening, as she sat on her balcony with a glass of wine, she reflected on the journey. The air was crisp, and the city lights below her sparkled like a constellation. She had worked so hard to get here, but she couldn't help but think of the people who had shaped her along the way, her family, her mentors, and even the colleagues who had once doubted her. They had all played a role in her growth. She knew there were still more challenges ahead, but for the first time in a long while, Jasmine felt ready for whatever came her way. She had learned to trust herself, to own her accomplishments, and to never apologize for her success. The next day, she walked into the office with a renewed sense of purpose. Her team was waiting for her, eager to continue the work they had started together. Jasmine could feel the respect in the room, and for the first time, she realized that she had earned it. As the days went by, Jasmine continued to excel, not just in her role as a leader, but also in her personal growth. She had become someone who no longer sought validation from others, someone who understood that her worth was not defined by the opinions of those around her. She was more than enough. By the end of the month, the project was officially completed, and the company was set to expand in ways they had never anticipated. The board praised Jasmine for her leadership, and her team celebrated the success they had achieved together. As she stood in the conference room, looking around at the people who had been with her every step of the way, Jasmine felt a deep sense of accomplishment. She had proven to herself and to the world that she was capable of achieving greatness. And in that moment, she knew that the journey was far from over. There was still so much more to accomplish, but for the first time, Jasmine wasn't just excited for the future. She was confident that she could handle whatever came her way, because she knew she had earned the right to lead.